All right, let's just jump right into this. We're about to dive into a scientific detective story that cracks a mystery that's been hiding in plain sight for 70 years, all found in old astronomical data from long before we ever put a single satellite into orbit. So it all starts with this number, 105,000. That's how many brief, totally unexplained flashes of light were recorded by the famous Palomar Observatory back in the early 1950s. Just poof, appearing and then vanishing in the night sky. Now here's where it gets really interesting, the timing. Every single one of these flashes was documented between 1950 and 1956. This is so important because that entire window is before the space age, before Sputnik, before us. And that gets us to the big puzzle, the one that astrophysicist Dr. Beatriz Villarroel has set out to solve. I mean, think about it. If humans hadn't put anything into orbit yet, what in the world could have been causing all these flashes? Okay, so before we even try to figure out what these things were, we have to tackle an even more basic question first. Were any of these 100,000 flashes even real? Or was this all just some kind of technical glitch? The main argument against them being real was that they were just plate defects. See, way back then, before digital cameras, astronomers used these huge glass plates covered in a chemical goop to photograph the stars. And the theory was that maybe these flashes were just random bubbles or dust or little stains in the old photo emotion. This is where Dr. Villarroel came up with a pretty brilliant test to settle it. A random flaw, a defect, could pop up anywhere on the plate, right? But a real physical object up there in orbit, it would be reflecting sunlight. And if it's reflecting sunlight, there's one place it absolutely could not be seen. She called it the Umbra test, and it is so elegant because it's so simple. She literally used the Earth itself as a giant light switch. As our planet goes around the sun, it casts this massive cone-shaped shadow out into space. Any real object flying through that shadow would suddenly go dark. It can't reflect sunlight back to the camera. A plate defect, though? It wouldn't care one bit about a shadow. And this is the result. It's fantastic. Instead of the flashes being evenly spread out, she found a huge 30 to 35% drop in the number of flashes inside Earth's shadow. That's not a random fluke. It's undeniable proof. A massive portion of these things weren't glitches. They were real, physical objects orbiting our planet. So they're real. But what were they? Well, the fact that they were brief flashes, not long streaks of light, told her something about their shape. As Dr. Villarroel says, their behavior was consistent with objects that are extremely flat and extremely reflective. So think less like a round asteroid and more like a flat mirror glinting in the sun. So we've proven they're real, physical, mirror-like objects. But you know what? That just makes the mystery even deeper. What were they? And why were they there? The next part of the answer, well, it takes a shocking turn toward our own nuclear weapons. And this is where the story gets absolutely wild. A follow-up study by Dr. Stephen Brull took the same data, but this time he compared it to another major event from the 50s, nuclear bomb tests. What he found was a 68% jump in the probability of seeing one of these flashes in the sky within 24 hours after a nuclear detonation on Earth. And it wasn't a fluke. His peer-reviewed work found what he called a triad of correlation. It's like a perfect triangle. The appearance of these objects in orbit was statistically linked to nuclear tests. Public UAP reports from that time were also linked to nuclear tests. And, incredibly, the objects in orbit were linked to those very same public UAP reports. All three were connected. And that startling nuclear link doesn't just show up in the data. It's actually backed up by a pattern of really strange events and official behavior from that exact same time. When you start to look at the historical record, you realize this story wasn't just happening on some old photo plates. For example, in 1952, right after that famous UAP incident over Washington, D.C., the director of the Harvard Observatory was on record destroying a third of his observatory's priceless collection of photo plates. A couple of years later, a major aviation magazine reported the Air Force was already tracking 2 unknown satellites 4 years before Sputnik. And by the 60s, the military had a name for these things, uncorrelated targets, objects that they systematically scrubbed from all public data. So what's the big takeaway here? When you put all the pieces together, The hard science, the statistical analysis, the historical context, a truly remarkable picture starts to form. Let's just lay it all out. The science suggests that before humanity even launched a single rocket into orbit, Earth was surrounded by thousands of physical objects that were not ours. These objects were flat, they were mirror-like, and they showed a clear, data-driven interest in our development of nuclear weapons. And there's very compelling evidence that similar objects are still being monitored in secret to this day. Now look, this research doesn't give us the final answer. It doesn't tell us who or what. But what it does is it forces us to look at our own recent past through a completely new lens and to ask a really profound question. If our little blue planet was under such close surveillance during one of the most dangerous moments in our history, who exactly was watching?